Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on access to sanitation and associated technologies. I would like to welcome you all. And before we go to the technical session, I would like to invite Ms. Priya Hingorani, who is a senior Supreme Court lawyer and President Chevening Alumni India. She is an alumnus of University of Delhi IP College for Women and a Chevening Scholarship recipient. She will introduce CAI to you and its role. Over to you, Priyaji.
Thank you, Mrinal. A very, very good evening to everyone here, President Mr. Thakkar and all our esteemed speakers. It's a pleasure to be among such experts in the field of sanitation and with partnering with Nirvan. It's I think it's one of the most unique organizations I have read about. I'm not personally aware of, but I've read about all of you, and I think you're doing amazing work. And I think it's important that with this Swachh Bharat mission which has been launched, technologies which are so important and which are now the backbone of the government is actually looking at them, that Nirgandh is taking it forward and playing a very key role in it. So I'm very, very pleased to be part, and on behalf of all the Chevening scholars in India, who are about 3,200 in all, very happy to partner with all of you for this important webinar. As Mrinal mentioned, I'm currently the president of Chevening Alumni India, and though I'm a practicing lawyer at the Supreme Court, a senior advocate with a diversified field of litigation practice, my pride is that we, as Chevening scholars, have been able to put together all the alumni across the country. We have 9 chapters, a vibrant alumni association with the chapter chairs doing a lot of work in their own respective states. The kind of programs we do vary from cultural, intellectual, theatre to programs which are specific to of interest to members who are from different walks of life. We have in the past couple of years done programs which are also important for the British High Commission perspective, because they actually their emphasis is on education, on sustainability, on now recently the new British High Commissioner has made a special remark on his coming, which he's just come about 10 days ago, saying that water, waste management, sustainability are key factors which they are looking for partnership between India and UK. And we hope that along with Chevening Alumni Association and all of you, Nirgandh, can do a program in association with the British High Commission and take it forward in a different manner with the key partners from UK and India sharing their knowledge and expertise. The area of work for the Chevening Alumni Association is very vast, and we look forward to having such programs to not only create awareness amongst the members who are not aware of it, but also to partner and take it forward with the government, because the government plays a very key role in this, and at times government looks at organizations like Nirgandh to give them the technology, give them the expertise. So we are very happy to be the bridge, as we've been mentioned, that the Chevening Alumni Association is a living bridge, both mentioned by our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, as well as Mr. Boris Johnson. So we are the living bridge, and we are happy to be part of a living bridge for programs like this as well. So having said that, I would just like to say that I'm really looking forward to being educated today by all of you esteemed panelists. And thank you very much for partnering with Chevening Alumni, and a special thanks to Mrinal Mathur for having got us together, and look forward to hearing. And I might in between slip away because I'm still in court and I'm at the mediation center, matter is going on. So I might in between slip away. Kindly excuse me for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priya Hingorani ji. Very grateful for your presence over here. I would like to invite Mr. Ashish Mehrotra. He is co-founder and CEO of Nirgandh, and he is a sales and operations person with 19 years of experience. He has worked with organizations like Colgate, Bharti Airtel, Tata uh, Teleservices, Idea Cellular, and was ex-country head for a mobile company. So over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, Mrinal. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar on access to sanitation and associated technologies. At Nirgandh, which is a social enterprise, we provide water-saving, technology-driven, environmental-friendly, affordable sanitation solutions because we actually strongly believe that healthy sanitation practices not only save lives, but increases economic activity potential for our users. Well, when we talk about sanitation for all, at Nirgandh, we strive to drive decentralized as well as centralized fecal sludge management products and services to the last mile possible. When I talk about last mile possibility, so the decentralized fecal sludge management, we are talking about on-site fecal treatment, the smallest entity being an individual household toilet, quite evident from our offering to rural and peri-urban population, as you could see in the presentation on your screens. So these are very low-cost toilets that we are offering to our rural and peri-urban population. Then we strive to do this on-site fecal treatment at all possible levels, starting with the individual household toilets to providing it with the community and the public toilets of different type of mobile toilets. Then we are also working on retrofitting of our biodigesters. We have done some retrofitting in Haryana, and I would be glad to share that we have recently started a sample study in collaboration with the Indian Institute of Human Settlement in Trichy. This will be based on individual households retrofitting. Well, with our focus on clean sanitation and environment, we want to bring smiles on the faces of our consumers. The focus over and above the consumers, the focus is also on environment. The water from our digesters can be used for horticulture, and it can further be cleaned through reed beds, which is a biological process and can be used for other activities too. We are young, we are growing up, we are just born, I would say 15-18 months old, but in the next 5 years, we aim to be a 2 million Nirgandh household organization, where we strive to save approximately 50 million liters of water per day, out of which around 30 million liters of this water can be reused for other activities, is what we strive for. And when we reach 2 million households, we think that we'll be impacting around 10 million lives. And out of those 10 millions, we see at least 5 million women feeling safe and empowered through using our clean technology. Thank you once again for joining us. Mrinal, thanks.
Thank you, Ashish, for introducing Nirgandh and the very important work that Nirgandh is doing. I would now like to formally open the technical session, and I will be your moderator for the session. I am Mrinal Mathur, and I'm an environmental planner and architect from SPA Delhi, and Achieving Scholar, a recipient of the Environmental Management and Sustainable Development Scholarship at the University of Wales. I have worked at TERI recently, World Bank, UN, and Environment Agency of the UK in the past. I'm associated with Nirgandh as a consultant, and hence we brought together this group of people to talk about a very pertinent challenge that we are facing now on sanitation and how technology can help us overcome this, how access to technology is important. As we are aware that the right to access to sanitation and basic services was recognized by the UN through the MDGs, particularly the MDG 7, and now by Goal 6 of Sustainable Development Goals. In 2000, the Millennium Development Declaration called for the world to halve by 2015 the proportion of people who do not have access to safe drinking water, as well as the proportion of people who do not have access to basic services. The UN Sustainable Development Platform confirms that water and sanitation are at the core of sustainable development, and the range of services they provide underpin poverty reduction, economic growth, and environmental sustainability. The world needs now to transform the way it manages its water resources and the way it delivers water and sanitation services for billions of people. Technology plays an important role in providing access to sanitation services in developing nations and in emerging economies. While developed nations have extensive sewerage networks and sewage treatment facilities, several barriers exist to operating conventional large-scale treatment systems in our countries like India. Some of these are unavailability of power to run mechanical and biological systems, poor sewerage networks, limited access to households, inability to pay for connections, financial incapacity of urban local bodies, say poor access to design and technology for pollution prevention. I'll give you a brief policy background on this in the Indian context. As my colleagues will in the upcoming presentations explain this more. But basically, policy around sanitation for urban areas has been spearheaded by MoHUA, or Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, through JNURM in 2005, through National Urban Sanitation Policy in 2008, National Mission on Sanitation on Sustainable Habitat 2010, Swachh Bharat Mission launched in 2014, Hriday 2015, Smart City Mission and Amrit in 2015, National Policy on FSSM 2017, Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 in 2019. Nearly 65 million Indians are housed in slums as per 2011 census. Of the 61,754 MLD of sewage generated in India, 63% is discharged untreated. 37% of sewage treatment capacity exists in India, 40% of which is still not fully operational. This poses serious implementation challenges to us. And today we are gathered here to discuss solutions for this challenge. So Nirgandh, along with CEI, are presenting this webinar to create awareness on the need for decentralized sewage treatment systems for both urban and rural areas. The key questions that this webinar will address are: what are the benefits of using on-site anaerobic technologies like biodigesters for sewage treatment? And what role can various stakeholders play in making India not only open defecation free, but also to prevent pollution of our waterways? This webinar will bring forth anaerobic treatment technologies and the role that decentralized systems can play in solving India's sewage problem. With this, I would now like to introduce Mr. Madhusudan Thakkar, founder and CTO of Nirgandh. Mr. Thakkar is an entrepreneur with over 50 years of experience in manufacturing, engineering, and design. He was a finalist in BMGF Reinvent the Toilet India Challenge. He is an MBA from Michigan State University, USA, and a BTech in Mechanical Engineering from IIT Delhi. Over to you, Mr. Thakkar, for an introduction to this.
Thank you, Mrinal. Can you see my screen? Is my screen visible?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Oops. Why is it gone? Thank you very much. I am very honored to be a part of this panel on sustainable sanitation and the way forward. To me personally, safe sanitation is almost a fundamental right. And for that reason, post my retirement, I've I'm striving to bring about whatever knowledge and experience that I have into this field. And this is also very important because we have to meet the United Nations SDG 6 by 2030. And even as we have now claiming to be ODF free, we still have a lot of things to achieve. We need to reclaim the wastewater which is generated with each defecation, because we are running into a crisis of water availability, and the sanitation will never be sustainable if enough water is not available. We also need to preserve our I've lost my screen is gone.
We can see you, Mr. Thakkar. Please carry on.
Oh, okay. So what we also have to understand that the wastewater, so-called wastewater, also has issues with public health. The water that causes problem for the nutrition values for young children, they die under the age of 5, nearly 500,000 of them. There are diarrhea and hepatitis issues. Women have problems because of bad water and poor sanitation. We need to preserve our environment, whether it is the air pollution, whether it is the water pollution. And doing all of this needs a lot of energy, which we have to conserve, because as it is, we are getting into the high use of carbon and fossil fuels and leading to global warming. As I mentioned, energy consumption in the traditional large centralized wastewater treatment plants has been one of the major constraints in our progress. Fortunately, this is now getting overcome with technologies which require less energy, and more energy is available from renewable energy is now available. Gradually, as interest is growing in the wastewater treatment, we are getting trained workforce, people who are engineers in wastewater treatment. In the past, sludge production was an issue where sludge would be scattered on and spoiling all our land masses, which is now being looked at as a resource. First of all, by converting that into water, which it largely is, and also to recover products like aluminum and even silver in some places. In the past, the footprint required for the centralized system even now is very large, but gradually with the technology and the new materials and the processes which have been developed with robotics, with artificial intelligence, with nanotechnology, biotechnology, all these stuff, we are able to reduce the footprint considerably. Instead of diving deep into the decentralized and centralized systems, I will just give you an overview of the differences. And the centralized systems need a much larger footprint because they handle millions of liters of water every day. They need sewage lines to be placed. So the investment in time and money is high, which is not so in the decentralized systems. And in the decentralized system, particularly when we're using biotechnology, some of the processes can be underground. Because of the large scale of the centralized systems, the operation and maintenance of the facility requires skill, there's machinery, the therefore the recurring expenses are pretty high. Whereas in a decentralized system, the staffing can be relatively unskilled and the cost of maintenance is very low. And here I would like to bring to your notice that there's a little township in South Delhi called Ayanagar. And there they have provided a decentralized system for about 300 families, where the total cost has been about 2.1 crores. And the maintenance cost of that is only about 18,000 rupees per month. The operation, because of the complexity of the plant, is not so good in the for the centralized system. It needs energy, it needs instrumentation, it needs systems, and conversely, for the decentralized systems, you have low complexity level, low power consumption. The power consumption could be just a simple pump in case the gradient for the flow of water is reversed. In Ayanagar, only a 2 horsepower pump is being utilized right now. Again, for centralized system, the time that I mentioned up front is high, largely because it needs extensive consultation and agreement between very influential stakeholders, right from politicians to the bureaucrats, to the vendors, to the funding institutions, and the persons who are impacted have very little say in it, but the system requires a lot of pre-agreement before even the system can be installed. In a decentralized system where the number of people who are being served is low, you have a few hundred households, a few thousand households, it's easier to convince a few set of people. Even the people who are there are not as influential and are not as vocal, other than in 1 or 2 meetings, and then people can move on. So in the decentralized in the systems, you have the medium size, the small size, and the on-site sanitation systems, which Ashish has referred to a little earlier. So for me, the smallest on-site sanitation system is the household biodigester toilet, where the fecal matter gets converted into water and methane with the bacteria, and you get relatively pathogen-free output water, which can also be either let out into the local drain at the minimum level, or sent into a reed bed and then used for other purposes, including horticulture or cleaning up of the household floor and stuff like that. And I'm personally very enamored of the miniaturization that is going on in this field of wastewater treatment, with low energy, which can use very, very small wattage pumps and stuff. So to sum up, the decentralized systems have economic benefits because there is no sewage network, there is no huge piping required, machinery required, leading to smaller investments. These are useful for areas of low population density, or when there are houses in close proximity to each other but fewer in number. And they provide us sludge which could be used for fertilizer, water that could be used for horticulture, and some methane for cooking and lighting. One of the things which has not yet been promoted very much and needs to be is the urine diversion toilets. Urine has many usage. It can be used for as a fertilizer for water for citrus plants, and yields up to 10 to 15% go up. It can be used as a depilatory for the tanning industry. It can be used as phosphorus for making matches, and the local communities can utilize it in very significant. It can also be used as a fertilizer with the magnesium phosphate can be made very easily with it. It's being done in Nepal very effectively. And for the success of the decentralized systems, it has to be designed well, and the design has to take into account the sources of water that are coming into the wastewater stream, the kind of toilets you have, whether it is a pit latrine or a twin pit or a biodigester. Also the sources, whether it is is the community partly residential, partly commercial, whether there's a lot of cooking going on, and a lot of kitchen water stream coming in carrying grease and all. So the design has to be based on the topography, the geography, the number of users, and the input that is coming in. At the same time, it is important to keep in mind the mindset of the population that it is serving. How likely it is that there'll be debris put into the waste stream. How much is the possibility of vandalism? These things need to be prevented in the design of the system, and is an important aspect to take into account as you're designing this. The success of the system depends very much on the community support. So creation of this system, it is important to have meetings, explain to the group of people the advantages, what all will be required in the disruption that it will cause, for how long. That is important. And more importantly for me is to explain to them how they will benefit from it. The output water that is brought down to the level of 10 BOD can be utilized in many ways after the reed bed. It can be used for horticulture. I would urge that whoever is designing it, bring in spatial architects who can also then develop recreation areas, flower beds, maybe small aquariums, so that the community gets involved in understanding how water can be used and reused. And finally, I think for the success of any decentralized system would be that they need to provide funds for timely maintenance, timely funds for maintenance. If that does not happen, then things will go wrong. A decentralized system will get a bad name, and the encouragement to have a system within a community on a small footprint will not be there, and that will be a disappointment. That's all I have to say, and I give it back to Mrinal in the hope that the needle will move forward with all of you participating. But I do hope that the needle moves faster. Back to you, Mrinal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thakkar. I noted that you've made some very pertinent points, and your overview on decentralized systems for sewage treatment has set the scene for us to continue. You've talked about economic benefits of decentralized systems, and you've also emphasized how urine and effluent could be reused. You've talked about various kinds of systems and toilets. And one word that you used is very important and very significant, which is disruption. So disruptive technologies is probably the need of the hour in a country like India to make a change happen and to make the change visible. You also talked about architects to be involved, and spatial planners to be involved in this work, and community to be involved in order to aid implementation along with funds. for maintenance. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite, with this introduction to decentralized technologies or decentralized sewage treatment plants, I would like to invite Dr. Girija Bharat, who is the founder director of New Gamma Consultants Private Limited, Gurgaon. She is an international expert with 30 years of experience in water quality and conducts research and capacity building activities in India on water resource management, water supply and sanitation, chemical pollution, including POPs, and environmental management. She was president fellow at George Mason University, USA, and is member of American Chemical Society, Lota Sigma Pi, and Honor Society for Women in Chemistry. She is the recipient of several national and international awards, including the recent Global Environment Award 2020 at the World Water Summit. She has authored 75 peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, including the Global Sustainable Development Report 2015 and 16. Dr. Girija will give us an overview on various technologies and will also introduce the decentralized technologies, including anaerobic biodigesters.
Thank you, Mrinal, for that kind introduction. I would, while I set the stage, I would request Soumya to give me sharing rights of my PPT. Thank you, Soumya, and thank you, Mrinal, and thank you, Nirgandh and Shevling Alumni Association for organizing this wonderful and very pertinent event. I was really a bit surprised when Mr. Ashish mentioned that it is 18 months old, and yet you have made so much of difference in the sector. That is really commendable. Congratulations to Nirgandh on that. Well, coming back to my topic, I am thankful to Nirgandh for having invited me for this particular topic, given the fact that I am also part of the national policy drafting wastewater reuse in India. So that gives me a lot of responsibility, because as of now we have 13 states which has developed state water policy, state wastewater reuse policy, and we are still not done much of headway in this space, in the sense, though the policy has been in place for many states, we are still a long way from actually making this difference on ground. Well, Surat and Tamil Nadu, Chennai have actually shown the way. Surat has been getting some revenue of 140 to 150 crores per annum by sale of reused wastewater. I should not call it wastewater, because in the parlance of technologists and policy makers, waste is actually a resource, so I would rather call it treated used water. Mrinal and Soumya, I'm not able to show my screen. If there is are you able to see my screen?
You can see your screen, Girija. I've given you the right.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's visible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, yes, India has actually made significant progress when it comes to the sanitation space. Like, we have basically done a lot of efforts to be where we are now, with 95 to 98% in urban sanitation. Paramita will correct me there, in ODF, in attaining ODF. However, we have other issues, in the sense we are not yet there in terms of fecal/management, wastewater treatment. The aspects which are covered under ODF plus and ODF plus plus, we are still a long way to go from there. So glad that Government of India has recognized this, and we are basically working towards making reuse of used water a reality. Yes. So basically ODF plus is toilet with water maintenance and hygiene. ODF plus plus will be with sludge and septage management. We are moving beyond ODF. We are going towards water plus. We are going towards wastewater treatment, fecal sludge management, etc. Industrialization and urbanization has actually put a huge stress on us, and we are here working towards making it a reality, how we can basically enter the market. There are many resources which are basically possible to reuse. However, we are not doing it, though we have the potential. Yes. So here, this is the wastewater reuse policy which we are bringing out, and support of Ministry of Jal Shakti, that is National Mission for Clean Ganga, GIZ, and we have done a significant headway. It should be coming out any time now. We submitted the draft report in December. This is the framework, the circular water economy under which we are working. The safe reuse of treated water policy is basically taking care of the used water from the treatment plant to raw water to agriculture, municipal, industry. Again, there is CPCB is supporting this industrial reuse of wastewater, rather industrial used water, and that work is parallelly going. Standards and compliances are issues which India has actually been struggling for a long time. So we are not yet there in terms of irrigation for edible food crops. When it comes to non-edible food crops, we are fine. We can irrigate our fields. We can use it for municipal purposes like cleaning spaces, etc. But definitely not on potable issues. Definitely not on edible crops, irrigation of edible crops. So these are big things which really needs a lot of effort, lot of secondary to tertiary treatment, and which is very cost intensive. For a country like India, we have to see how pragmatic it is, because we should not end up becoming a non-starter in the process. It's very important to strike a balance between practicality and compliance standards, because we cannot now ensure that treated water be used for potable purposes, and then groundwater recharge, and agricultural for food, edible food. This is the framework of our treated water, used water policy. The vision is that widespread and safe reuse of treated used water in India that reduces the pressure on scarce water resource. So basically, we are freeing water so that it can be used for fresh water. We are basically freeing it. The second thing is, as I mentioned, it is circular economy approach. We can retrieve a lot of components. My previous speaker, Mr. Thakkar, has already mentioned how we can utilize NPKs from the wastewater, urea, etc., which can be utilized for agriculture and other purposes. The third and most important is water quality aspect, because this water, if it is treated, will not pollute the water streams, the water bodies, the surface and groundwater bodies which we have. So basically, the technology required to achieve end users of treated wastewater, as of now we are thinking in terms of secondary treated wastewater, so that it meets certain discharge norms which is set by CPCB, and NGT, National Green Tribunal, has also set some discharge norms which are much stringent. So we have to see that we are in compliance with these discharge norms. So this slide gives a basic overview of what are the processes, the treatment technology processes. And India being a country which is resource crunched, our ULBs are always research crunched. So we have to see that it is like Google. It is doable for our country, our ULBs. And then we have very good examples like Chennai, and Surat, which has paved the way for the reuse being generating huge revenue. So I have mostly covered, and in fact, Mrinal has mentioned many of the aspects here in this slide. So basically, our treatment, 70% of wastewater is getting discharged into wastewater streams, and our capacity to treat is approximately 37% of the wastewater, that is 22,963 MLD. 40% of the treatment capacity is not fully operational because of many aspects, electricity and others. So we have, in spite of having capacity, we are actually not able to utilize it. So we have this different kinds of toilet technology options. We have issues at each and every stage of containment, conveyance, treatment, reutilization, etc. For a country like us, we cannot say it is one size fit all, because we cannot say centralized is good or decentralized is good, but gradually we are moving towards decentralized because that is being more practical. We need to have some hybrid model where we are able to cater to the large centralized plants are able to cater to large volume, and the smaller ones can cater to decentralized places. Because even within the state, within each state, we have different geographical areas and different geographical other constraints. So a hybrid model would definitely have its advantages. So some of the advantages and disadvantages I have just spelled out here. The centralized treatment, the advantages is one treatment facility which is easy to maintain and less treatment infrastructure because it's catering a huge volume of water, and the disadvantages is it's very cost intensive. It is large infrastructure for sure, and sewage pipeline and household connection is a major issue when it comes to centralized treatment, which decentralized treatment is taking care of to a large extent. These are some of the technologies. I have just sketched some of the primary, secondary, tertiary, and post-treatment features. So basically, we have huge issue with septic tank because our septic tanks are not designed to the BIS standards, and our septic tank is more of a holding tank. So World Bank has come out with this report, and I'm sure all the sanitation experts here would agree with me that this is definitely, though it is taking care of the containment aspect, but it is definitely having issues in terms of pollution, leaching, etc. from these holding tanks. For the secondary treatment, anaerobic baffled reactors and aerobic filter, which is like a fixed bed biological reactor where wastewater passes through the filter media. The anaerobic baffled reactors are improved septic tanks upgraded with series of baffles along the treatment chamber for degradation of suspended and dissolved solids. For the tertiary treatment, we have constructed wetlands, we have phytotreat technology, we have many other tertiary treatment aspects, which some of my next slides will show. So, and after the tertiary treatment, we have this post-treatment polishing ponds, which are open shallow basins for removal of remaining suspended solids and BOD that may be left after secondary effluent treatment. Well, that as I mentioned, our treatment plants So, technological options we have the ones which are widely used in India, of which upflow anaerobic sludge blanket, which is most common, and activated sludge process ASP, moving bed reactors, sequential batch reactors are also quite used in India. The decentralized treatment commonly used are anaerobic baffled reactors, reed beds, waste stabilization ponds, fluidized aerobic bed reactor, and fecal sludge treatment using duckweed ponds. These are some of the baffled reactors, which consist of settling compartments with the same Uh, mm, yeah. So the anaerobic baffled reactor, as I was mentioning, with the same dimension as the first, it consists of settling compartments with the same dimensions as the first compartment of a conventional septic tank, which is followed by a number of small compartments. But we have seen in many cases these compartments are missing. It's just like the mason is the primary decision maker in many cases, and he tries to cut cost by removing these barriers, which is actually not the right way of having this anaerobic baffled reactor. So we have to see that these aspects are not small; they are actually very important aspects which are done to the precise requirement. The reed beds, which are natural treatment systems that use fast-growing plants, as Mr. Thakkar was mentioning just now, which is a species to assimilate dissolved oxygen, organic impurities. It's a combination of physical settlement, photosynthesis, and uptake by plants, which is becoming more and more common. Though in many places, due to geographical terrain, it doesn't work out in some of the locations within India because of it needs huge space required. The waste stabilization pond also for rural areas it does work, peri-urban areas it does work, but then it has a space crunch. However, they are very good examples which are being utilized. In India, the current wastewater treatment plants are very compact. The ones which are there for ages, that those are very space intensive ones, but the ones which are just now coming are quite compact and much more efficient than the previous ones. The anaerobic ponds, which are comparatively small and deep, as there is no need for aeration, they receive raw sewage which is treated by anaerobic bacteria, and while sludge that builds up in the bottom end of the pond is digested by the anaerobic microorganisms. The next one, the facultative ponds, which are shallower, which with a large surface area than the anaerobic ponds, they consist of aerobic zone close to the surface and a deeper anaerobic zone. The maturation ponds I have already mentioned. They are also extremely important for the finishing of the wastewater after treatment. The fluidized aerobic bed reactor wastewater, this is an aerobic process in which wastewater flows vertically upwards from the filter bed of lightweight inert material at a sufficient velocity to the fluidized bed. The bacterial biofilm develop on the media particles and treat the wastewater as it passes through. And there is, because of the retention time, it has better contact time, and the treatment, the better the contact time, the more the contact time, the better the treatment.
Girija ji, just a quick reminder about the time for you.
Yes,
so if you would just
I will quickly sum up in 2 or 3 minutes, please. Is that okay, Mruna?
Absolutely. Just
sure. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Fecal sludge treatment. Basically, I will not go into the details of fecal sludge treatment, but then it has been seen that the on 14th of December 2019, there was a discussion in the Ganga Council. Prime Minister had chaired that, and there was discussion about not just wastewater, but the biosolids as well. So we have to be mindful that it's not, we have to treat it end to end. It's not just wastewater, but the biosolids, extremely important aspect, not to be missed out by us by any chance. The duckweed ponds similar to the ones which I've already mentioned, so I'll not go into the detail. So our talk is not too much into the toilet aspect. We are talking into the wastewater aspect, so I'll not go into the biodigested toilet. I'm sure this has been covered by the next, will be covered by the next speaker, but just a few slides to show that biodigested toilet, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, Mr. Thakkar, we have the option of methane gas being utilized for purposes like lighting and cooking and other aspects, while we are able to make use of the water which is coming out of this setup. There is a slight modification in railways, and this is also customizable for places where the groundwater level is very high. We have seen in Kerala that the groundwater level is very high and it pollutes basically the water table. So this kind of biodigester toilets are quite conducive to many geographical terrain within India. The advantages being sustainable technology, reduced water use, eco-friendly, economical, high effluent quality, low space for sure, non-dependence of energy because many of our places have issues with electricity. It sources of renewable energy in the like biogas being generated, and it is suitable for all terrains. And desludging of biodigester is not required since the bacteria by itself dies. This I have already mentioned, that technology, we have to be sure that it can be, the water which is coming out can be utilized safely. Safety aspect is extremely important. The way forward, this is my last slide. We have to have a roadmap built in. There is need to improve wastewater governance, national and state level policy directions for improving sewage management through use of appropriate technology and decentralized treatment as applicable for different ULB. The need is different. There are learning lessons which from states like Gujarat, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, etc. are emerging. There is need for dissemination of that, need for scaling up the demonstrative effects, public-private partnership as something which can be leveraged, policy support for enhancement of on-site sanitation and promote small-scale sanitation providers. There is need to enhance the capacity of ULBs and other relevant stakeholders, including the community. So I will leave it there because my next speaker, Ms. Paramita, will be taking up on the stakeholder aspects. So I leave it here. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Girja ji, Dr. Girja Bharat. This was very, very informative. You spoke about technologies and also about the basic policies around sanitation. You talked about industrialization, urbanization, and also its use of treated wastewater in crops and compliance standardization. You mentioned Chennai and Surat and the successes that have happened over there. You suggested a hybrid model. You talked about septic tank and the pollution, the leaching that it leads to, thereby, a need for decentralized systems which are innovative in nature, and wastewater governance and decentralized treatment lessons to be scaled up for and promoting small-scale, promoters for this work. I'm mindful of the time, it's 5:30 almost already. I would quickly introduce Ms. Paramita Datta Dey, and she works at the National Institute of Urban Affairs, and she is a program lead for sustainable cities over there. She is a master's in planning from School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and has more than 20 years of experience in urban development, water and sanitation, urban poverty reduction, policy and program development. Ms. Paramita will introduce us to stakeholder perceptions involved in sanitation and the use of technology in this challenge. Ms. Paramita, over to you.
Thank you, Mrinal, and thank you, Nirvan, for organizing this very timely webinar wherein we had the budget announced recently, and wastewater, solid waste management, and fecal sludge management have got a very important focus, particularly in the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0. So coming straight to the aspect which I have been asked to deal with, that is stakeholder engagement. So my earlier speakers spoke about technology and particularly focused on decentralized system is important, where centralized and decentralized technologies can go hand in hand. I've been working in the area of capacity building for the Swachh Bharat mission. We recently completed a capacity building program and trained more than 6,000 officials across 3,500 urban local bodies. And our learnings have been that stakeholder engagement is very important. Even if you have the best of technologies, per se, stakeholders are not sensitized and engaged at the right stage. Implementation does not happen the way it should be. And finally, our goal of achieving safe sanitation for all does not get achieved. So if we look at the sanitation sector in a city or an urban local body and the stakeholders there, particularly with regard to domestic sanitation, there are primarily two stakeholders. That is the urban local body or the city, which comprises its officials, that works as a service provider as well as a regulator when we are talking about a city. Of course, there are the central and the state pollution control boards that are looking at the outflow and the treated wastewater that comes out and how it is meeting the standard as well. And of course, then there is the user, that is the citizen. Now, if we take the scenario of a small or a medium town in India, so the first stakeholder is the user, who is at the user interface. That is the first household toilet, if we are going to talk about, which could be a household toilet, and then if it can be, if you look at a bigger, then it's a community or a shared toilet, and then public toilet, and so on and so forth. So there are primarily three levels of users. One is the individual user, then there is the community, which is at the community or the institutional level, and then finally we are looking at the city as a whole. Now, it is very important that we engage with the users right from planning to implementation and then operation and maintenance stage. So let's take the example of a user. As Girija ji mentioned and Mr. Thakur also mentioned, that there are a large number of septic tanks in our Indian cities. And these tanks are either very big or they're very small and they're not emptied regularly. So there are a whole lot of issues that a user is confronted with. Now, why does this happen? Because the user does not really know what are the actual standards. And as Girija ji mentioned, that the mason becomes the primary decision maker. So it is very important that we not only sensitize the user, but who is the user interfacing with? So the mason. So there is a great deal of capacity building and sensitizing. Then when we move upwards, the next level is that say a decentralized, because here we are focusing on decentralized system. So if we are designing a decentralized system at the community level, say for a housing society or for a slum area or for a commercial complex or an institutional complex, then the user is either the it's a slum community if it's a low income household, or it is the resident welfare association, or it is the elected representatives like the councillors or the leaders who are there. And then when we go to the next level at the city level, then it is the elected representatives like the mayors or the chairpersons. So when we are talking about either a new technology or a new system, we have to work with all these users right from the stage where we are conceptualizing to implementation. So once we are conceptualized, we've implemented, the next stage is operation and maintenance. As Mr. Thakur said, that not only is there, it is important to have enough resources in terms of money to operate and maintain, but it's also important to have capacity to manage this. Now, when we were doing these capacity building programs, so we had this very interesting group activity where we asked the city officials to get together in a group and design a system for a city. So when they were designing a lot of, and this is also, we also said, take the example of a live city and you tell us what are the, bottlenecks that you deal with. So one of the bottlenecks that came about was that when you have a number of decentralized systems in a city, how do you manage it? So there has to be a management system in place while we are thinking of a policy directive or a plan or a strategy that we are going to move into a hybrid system where there will be a number of decentralized systems. So that is one part of stakeholder engagement. The other part that we came across when we spoke to a whole lot of, we did a training needs assessment actually for some cities, and we were trying to know what is it that where is the capacity gap. So there was there's an example that I'm citing where we were saying that where there are so many innovations happening and there are so many innovators out there who have very good examples, but why are these not getting upscaled? So one of the stakeholders told us, that is the city officials, that if there is a very innovative and good system in place, but the procurement system is such that it focuses more on the specifications rather than on the outcomes. That is, this is what the specifications should be, and these are the if it's about the discharge, then the discharge should be the focus is more on the specification of how to do it and how to actually construct it and get it there, rather than the focus being more on that whatever system you have in place, the outcome that the performance should be like this. So it should be more of performance based rather than specification based. So in a nutshell, what I would like to say is that you have to first of all have an understanding of the stakeholders while we are planning, and then an understanding of how one is going to engage with them, and finally how is the whole system going to be maintained. Thank you. Over to you, Nirna.
Thank you so much, Paramita. Quickly summarizing, you've talked about the city and ULBs as being stakeholders, as well as pollution control boards, and then the users. And you did mention again septic tanks as being quite polluting because they're not designed well, and masons, which become primary decision makers. So management of decentralized systems thereby becomes an important point and is a capacity gap. Procurement also focuses on specifications rather than outcomes, and performance-based service level management is something that you were probably alluding to. Understanding stakeholders and noting them and engaging with them systematically is something that's an important point that you made. Thank you so much, Paramita. I would like to quickly introduce, because we are running short on time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Sanjeev Jha, Project Lead, India Sanitation Coalition, FICCI. He is a development sector professional with nearly 3 decades of experience in WASH, health and nutrition. He has a postdoctorate degree and has served in Government of India in the capacity of researcher for more than 12 years. He managed and supervised Global Sanitation Fund, a UN trust fund program for Jharkhand. He has been in a consulting prior to this. Mr. Jha will introduce us to financing decentralized treatment systems and associated challenges. Over to you, Mr. Jha.
Thanks very much. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity, which I value much, because for 2 reasons. Because, I think when Nirgant approached us, then probably the atmosphere in the country had just started heating up, in anticipation of the budget 2021-22. And the way everything seems to have been shaped up now, looks like an opportune time to have the discussion around the decentralized, treatment system. But my response should be slightly wider than that, because of my experience and the kind of work India Sanitation Coalition is actually engaged since its inception 2015 on the FICCI platform. Just about 30 seconds regarding this coalition. I think all of you are already aware. But then I would only like to say that India Sanitation Coalition, right since its inception in 2015, has come a long way in the sense that it already had the advantage of being constantly engage with the corporate partners, being were sitting at FICCI, and trying and making sure that the corporate engagement in the water and sanitation space, and particularly through this coalition in the sanitation space, continues and keeps on enhancing. And then on the other, it also had the advantage of not only engaging with Government of India, the relevant department around both SBM urban and SBM rural both, but even at the certain states where the coalition had been able to find useful partners, both the international development partners, the INGOs, and the state government per se, to be able to develop and design, and also support indirectly in the implementation of some of the useful program for achieving the collective outcomes on the sanitation front. To set a little bit of the context, I'd like to say that all of us are aware that the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 different goals, among which water, sanitation, and hygiene form goal 6. And under this framework, there are separate targets for drinking water, water quality, water-related ecosystems, and specifically the adequate and equitable access to sanitation. Globally, an additional 1 million persons, and this data I'm quoting from some authentic sources. So if any one of you is actually interested in having a look at the citation, I'll be happy to share that. Globally, an additional 1 million persons would need to have an access to improved sanitation facilities each day to reach this goal by 2030. India has done well in this regard by providing toilets to all to end open defecation. And yet our cities are a major contributor of untreated wastewater, creating hotspots for environmental degradation and public health hazards, impairing social and economic productivity. And this current pandemic is a live example. See, a COVID-19, a pandemic has starkly highlighted the need for sanitation to be a universal and inclusive service. Sharing of toilets, lack of adequate water and sanitation facilities is a critical weakness in the informal urban settlement. I remember one of you have already highlighted that the total number, the exact population which live in these urban settlements which have not been addressed until now adequately. And more than 60% of the sewage has already been shared by most of you, generated by urban India, enters untreated into our water bodies like rivers, resulting in pollution and making the water unfit for human consumption at all. So without action, the challenges will only increase by 2050, when global demand for fresh water is expected to be 1/3 greater than it is now. So dangerous. I've also been, you see, coming to the human excreta and the wastewater management, because the entire, the central theme of today's webinar is around that, as to how to be able to treat the human excreta and the wastewater management. And to me, I think it requires a more, and it's, to me, means that it's an opinion which is now building up in the space. It requires a more integrated and inclusive approach. And therefore, a paradigm change needs to be brought about in how sanitation solutions are actually planned for. So I view this seminar not exactly the starting point, but certainly a significant point from where probably the discussion can actually follow. That let's not focus only on sewage or only on decentralized, or only on fecal sludge management. Let's try and work out a menu of options, and then see how the local conditions, etc., are favoring them, and then accordingly the suitable design interventions should be framed and implemented. Coming to the the sanitation or the WASH financing space, which is absolutely critical, there are certain interesting data which again I'd like to share. That if you look at the Indian data. So in the interest of time, I'll save, and I'm not going into the global aspects unnecessarily. So I will try and restrict my discussion, my talk, to the Indian context only. A study on financial requirements and gaps for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in India was conducted in 2015 at the behest of UNDP and the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. They assessed that to achieve the SDG target 6.1 would take 4 lakh crore INR between a period 2015-2020, 2022. And target 6.2, which related to sanitation and hygiene, would need 1.56 lakh crore between 2015 and 2019. The expenditure on rural sanitation, we noticed, had increased at an annual growth rate of more than 20% over the last 10 years. This public financing, coupled with support from the World Bank, which was to the tune of $1.5 billion for the rural mission, not for the urban mission, helped India to ensure that everyone in rural areas has access to improved sanitation, leading to the success of reduction of open defecation by 2019. So, given the scenario, two things I would like to highlight, and I would also invite questions and for discussion on that if time permits. That it's not that public financing in adequate terms is not available. It's not only about the allocation being made. It is about the allocation being disbursed and made available to the program managers at the state, down to the district, and the Gram Panchayat level in the case of a rural mission, and in the case of urban, up to the ward level. So what is it which is preventing, and not exactly preventing, but then actually needs to be looked into, which would ensure that the public money flows from state down to the state, through district, till the panchayat level. That is one. Second, it's important that if it is only public financing, or if it is only concessional financing of the likes of the World Bank support or ADB support, then the stakeholders or the program managers would tend to conduct one way. Imagine if the commercial finance also creeps in, and which is actually a necessity, then probably the whole system becomes more dynamic, and the borrowers, the service providers and the creditors, they follow a particular pattern to be able to borrow and lend at will, to be able to provide the quality sanitation services, as happened in the case of water. And if you would allow me a couple of minutes more, then I've got one interesting thing to share with you guys. See, to the question of how there could be a business opportunity in the sanitation space, we realized that the need for both demand and supply in the area, which could drive people's willingness to pay for these sanitation services. That is what is required, And to be able to create that demand, there are two things that are actually needed in this space. One is the much needed self-awareness, and if it is missing for whatever reason or not optimal, then there should be an incentivization to create and sustain that demand. So any business proposition in a market economy, according to us, has two elements. One, a demand that has been generated, but not to the extent desired, and is crucial to people having the ability and willingness to pay for the sanitation services. And then there has to be a policy to take care of the market failures. So we believe that enough has been done on the supply side, and also a considerable amount on the demand side. But on the demand side, much more remains to be done. And I'm glad the way this budget 2021-22 has been formulated and announced, the way the water and sanitation has been emphasized, that's really impressive. And if you look at the two important schemes, and for the first time, the major theme of the current budget is not only Swachh Bharat, it is Swachh Bharat, Swasth Bharat, and it's an important theme of the union budget this year. And the budget last year had also talked of inclusion of water and sanitation in the holistic vision for the healthcare reforms. And this year, the government has gone a step further to provide a template for the long-awaited convergence between the two sectors, WASH and public health. So water supply and sanitation has been essentially linked through this government policy initiative, through this union budget. So now, and believe me, had this pandemic not been there, probably the realization around the water and sanitation and hygiene being so important would have still been missing. So in a way, we have also benefited, at least in terms of a realization, as to why water and sanitation services are absolutely critical. So the a new centrally sponsored scheme, PM Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat, with an outlay of over 64,000 crore over 6 years to develop capacities of primary, secondary, and tertiary care, and support for less than 20,000 rural and more than 11,000 urban health and wellness centers is particularly noteworthy in the current budget. On WASH, the budget is damn impressive, I would say, and it focuses on urban water and sanitation by including complete fecal well management and wastewater treatment, segregation of garbage at source, reduction in single-use plastic, and reduction in air pollution by effectively managing waste from bioremediation of legacy dump sites. The central government has demonstrated conviction as well as political action. The budget proposes for the urban Swachh Bharat mission that it will be implemented with a total financial allocation of 1,40,000 plus crores over a period of 5 years from 21 to 26. That's impressive. The Jal Jeevan Mission, with which the ODF sustainability, as has been highlighted by other panelists, intricately linked, is being implemented all across, where 2.86 crore households are proposed to be covered with a functional household tap connection. And the allocation numbers I'm not going into because those are absolutely unnecessary now. So overall, I'll say that public finance is available. Concessional finance would also be available. Commercial finance, all of us at FICCI and multiple other platforms are actually trying to help creep into that system. And then it's important that the state should also be equally responsible to the policy changes and the policy guidelines which government of India has been able to throw.
Sanjeev, I would actually, sorry to interrupt, but the time, we are really short on time. So please it's very interesting to know numbers. And
so it's Mrinnal, it's absolutely fine. So now I will close here because now I have got certain examples where the private sector participation around a treatment space has made interesting headways. So Andhra Pradesh is one example, and there are some other examples. So I would leave it to the Q&A session, and if any of the panelists or anybody else in the audience is interested, then I have all this information to share. Thank you so much, Mrinnal. Hand it over to you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. I will just quickly summarize. You give us very interesting information that COVID-19 has actually prompted a little bit of change in the budget. And also the SDGs are very difficult to meet because the kind of funds that they require to meet 6.1, which is 4 lakh crore, and 6.2, which is 1.56 lakh crore by the timeline that is suggested in the target, is quite tough. However, we've seen public financing change, and the flow of money right now in this budget increase quite a bit, and this is very interesting and very heartening to see. Pradhan Mantri Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat and the linkage between WASH and public health has been brought forward. Business opportunity in this space, I noted that you talked about incentives, which is very important, because you see, when we need to create a demand, for instance, in the energy sector, the incentives were very high for renewable energy. So where is that incentive over here to create the demand and the economy around toilets or sanitation? If the private sector has to come in, that is a good question for further deliberation. I would now like to actually invite Mr. Santosh Raghavan KV from IIHS, Indian Institute of Human Settlements. He will address, therefore we go to implementation as we go through this flow of discussion. He will address issues in implementing technology for sanitation in this field. And as we discussed, till now, decentralized treatment technology can augment treatment capacity. So certain queries that Mr. Santosh has been working with to prepare for this seminar are: what are the barriers in terms of perceptions towards implementing decentralized treatment plants? What are the challenges in implementing sewage treatment technology in anaerobic biodigesters? What are the capacity building needs for administrators and ULBs? And what financial models can enable implementation? Over to you, Santosh ji.
For that, as Soumya puts up the slides, so I will just start briefly about what we are trying to do. So IIHS, Indian Institute for Human Settlements. So we are a prospective university headquartered in Bangalore. So we have 2 or 3 different streams of work. So I'm part of the practice program. So we believe in practice-based teaching. So also, I mean, there's a convergence from practice to academics, right? So we are supporting a program. We are supporting the government of Tamil Nadu through Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program, which helps the state to scale non-sewage sanitation, this fecal sludge management along with on-site sanitation system. So whatever I talk about today, so will be primarily be based on our experience. Soumya, could we just put the slides in the whatever projection mode so that the audience can see clearly? So I think Paramita in a way alluded what are the challenges that we face when we start rolling out, implementing all of that. So I would like to start with one of the key things is that, so with the on-site sanitation system, which is one of the, I mean, especially the one which are connected to individual households, that's the, in terms of level, that's the most decentralized, I would say. If you move on to the next slide. So how do we regulate these kind of systems in the first place, right? So what is the way with which one is permitted to put them and what functions they serve, right? So, and also in practice, how this is being in a way constructed, operated, maintained, and all of that. So one of the key constraint what we see, especially in an urban location. So, I mean, I'm distinguishing urban and rural because urban comes with challenges such as availability of land, like you have very high density population, especially in urban poor settlements, right? So you do not have enough space to put up these systems. So that's one of the key things. So, and also since these are being regulated based on specifying the design standards per se. So we see that one, these are being implemented in the way that is possible on field with whatever knowledge and the costs that one could bear. So typically what we have seen and our experience is that, say in a place like Trichy, which has 1 million population and close to 200,000 households, I mean, you will have one way or the other, some sort of a system for managing sanitation, right? So in a place like Trichy, you also have sewage sanitation, which is a centralized way of managing your waste, right? So even if such systems exist, so you have to have on-site systems because the coverage of network sanitation is incremental. So probably at this point, as we speak, only 50% to 60% of the 200,000 households is covered by network, and on-site systems do exist. The second important thing is that, so I mean, if you look at the policy regulation around this, so one of the key thing which drives the whole implementation and regulation of these implementation and also monitoring of this is, so ULBs in a way are responsible for approving whatever that is planned, and also in a way if there are any issues around this, for example, the building rules in a way regulates these standards and also its implementation. So the key challenge there is that, one, since they're scattered across the city, so ensuring the quality assurance is one of the biggest challenges, right? So because of this, we see non-standard containment systems across India. So I mean, Tamil Nadu is, I mean, we have many such non-standard systems, which is one of the biggest problems. Just to get a sense of how big the problem is, and also we're talking about designs and technologies, right? So I think there is a substantial potential for us to kind of look at how do we improve the already existing systems. So in a city like Trichy, we could have close to maybe 100,000 systems, and out of which probably most of them, as you see, that either they are cited improperly, so that their function, right? So public health goal of protecting the surrounding environment, I mean, it is not something which is served, right? So citing could be in the case of, say, for example, if you're looking at leaching systems, which is figure C here, so they're located so closely that it will not perform the function that they're supposed to function. So that's one. Second thing is that urban areas have other infrastructure, say, for example, the water supply lines. So the one in A, so you see that the water supply line going inside on-site sanitation system. And then others are built in such a way that you hardly have access to perform any services, any maintenance services. And this also leads to the other question, which is not being discussed at all, is how do we address the safety of people who are working in these conditions, right? So that is something which is very, very important. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is that you have substantial number of systems which needs to be retrofitted or improved to perform those functions for which they have been created in the first place. So that's the first message. And there, though we have standard designs per se, but implementation on the ground meeting those design specifications and the design constraints is not all that easy. It's one of the biggest challenges. That's where institutions and also the private players like Nilgand play a significant role. And also the key considerations when you design these kind of systems, like low in terms of footprint, low in terms of energy operations, all of that are very, very important. And also if you're thinking in terms of long-term goals such as resilient systems, climate sensitive systems, all of that. So all these factors will go in, especially when we are trying to put such a scattered system. So it's very difficult to regulate. I mean, even STPs are difficult to regulate. Imagine the on-site systems, which is very, very important. So we have substantial legacy structures which are not built to standards. And then we see that retrofitting or making certain improvements to meeting those standards is possible in only few cases. If you move on to the next slide, so just to show you some examples from the field, these are the design and construction issues, right? So, I mean, many of these are not according to the standard, in a way leading to, probably they might be doing more harm than what is supposed to do. So if you move on to the next one, so this is a simple case. Soumya, the next slide. Yeah, so to the one to my left, so before, I mean, the containment which is there, I mean, this is what we normally see. So if you were to move from this to a normal or a standard ones, the effort is substantial. The investments are also substantial, and there is a substantial resistance from the households to do something about it. It's not like water supply or energy, where the demand is understood fairly well, and then people are in a way trying to invest on them, or in one way or the other it affects. I mean, these are also affecting the routine operations, but the thing is, if I can find other ways of managing this, right? So if I can just let these waste out directly to the drains that are there, so then I'm not bothered. And most of these are below ground. That's also a disadvantage. In many cases, we find it difficult to look at where the on-site systems are, right? So we don't know where these systems are and what problems these pose, and then how good these are in terms of implementation, monitoring, maintenance challenges. These are some of the things that we have been observing. For example, when we tried working with ULBs to introduce some of the changes around how they work, though we have building regulations and then the rules made there, and so how do you implement them on ground, right? So if you classify them into two broad areas of work, so one is around how you ensure that the new constructions are according to whatever the standards per se. So that's one area of problem. So the other one is around how do you ensure that the old ones, which are not small, so big, right? So how do we convert them into a proper ones, or at least in terms of functions they serve? So these are some of the key challenges apart from the sanitation worker safety. So this needs to be maintained. I mean, I'm sure this beyond certain, I would say, abuse, so it will start backflowing, right? So you won't be able to use your toilets after some time, for sure, if they're not maintained properly. So then this leads to certain practices which in a way are very harmful to the people involved in working. So these are some of the challenges from an implementation perspective, right? So I think a clear consideration of what will go into design is important, and also it is also important to kind of maintain them. So these are the 2 or 3 things, and the multiple stakeholders which Paramita alluded to. So they are, I mean, there are certain roles and responsibilities which also needs to be kind of streamlined. These are some thoughts from us based on the Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program, TNSSP.
Thank you very much, Santosh ji. Really appreciate your views from the lessons that you've learned from Tamil Nadu and the implementation work that you've done. You've clearly stated that standard siting issues, water supply lines getting into sanitation, reduced safety of workers, well-being, and building regulations that are not in place. Few of the issues. Is someone, is it my computer or is it somebody else's which is making this noise? It's me?
No, there was some other static. I've put the person on mute.
Thank you. Retrofitting and is also a challenge, as you've mentioned. So I'll quickly move on to questions that we have received. There have been some pertinent 4 questions that we've got from the audience, which is very good. I would pose, starting right away with you, Mr. Santosh, can decentralized systems be implemented successfully in cities? With your experience in Tamil Nadu, is it something that can be done easily?
Easily is an adjective which is difficult for me to comment on, because we have taken nearly 5 years. So Tamil Nadu has introduced operative guidelines for septage management. In a way, it has also considered improving on-site sanitation systems. So yes, but on the other hand, so if you're thinking in terms of scale, right? So where we are in 2015 to where we are now, right? FSM in India and also in Tamil Nadu has moved substantially. Yes, so on-site system is one of the key consideration when you're providing sanitation for all and sanitation now, right? So these do exist. So as I said, retrofitting, equivalent, or these legacy systems are there. So we need to focus on improving them. That's important, and that's where FSM and decentralized sanitation will play a key role. And yes, it can be done easily, and also we are scaling at speed, and this is the time, right? So there are many states, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Telangana, right, Odisha, so Tamil Nadu. So there have been and then alliances like NFSSM Alliance, National Fecal Sludge and Septage Management Alliance, which in a way spearheading some of the work across. So, and we will soon see a substantial scaling of non-sewage sanitation, which complements other forms of sanitation. Yes.
Thank you so much. Also, there's an interesting question which I would pose to NIUA, Paramita. There seems to be a shortage of manuals which would give design estimates, space, cost details for various kinds of situations. Each ward localities, should have such information, and it should be available. So, from a government perspective, and also from a NIUA perspective, how is this information awareness, manuals, how can they be made available in such places? Basically,
Okay.
decentralizing where manuals themselves. 74th or 3rd Constitutional Amendment.
So there are a lot of advisories and manuals that are available. The CPHEO manual is the main manual for all people who are into design and implementation and construction. Other than that, the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban has a very vibrant website which has a whole lot of advisories and manuals with respect to not only decentralized sanitation, but with regard to all aspects of the SBM, particularly SBM 1.0 that has just culminated, and now we are into SBM 2.0. So there are there are a lot of videos, there are a lot of advisories, there are a lot of there's a lot of material out there. So if you go to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Alleviation website, go to SBM Urban, there are a number of advisories, good practice documents, and also at NIUA, our website also contains a lot of work that we are doing around sanitation. So as Santosh ji just mentioned about the NFSSM Alliance, and as part of the alliance, we are also making a lot of training modules. So all the modules regard to decentralized sanitation and fecal sludge and septic management are also out there on our website. For Swachh Bharat Mission, we have an interactive website where we had as I mentioned in my talk, that we did a lot of capacity building work for 4 years, and we had more than 151 workshops. So we took people to field visits in these workshops, and these were focused more on solid waste management, but we also talked about decentralized fecal sludge management. A lot of material is out there on solid waste management in a decentralized manner across 58 cities and across the entire value chain of solid waste management. So there is no dearth of material, it's all there in the digital form.
Thank you so much. I hope that helps the question. I hope it helps Mr. Vijay Shankar, who's asked this question. Now, I would like to ask a question about data. You have mentioned that there are manuals and there are such information available online, but however, for decision making, scientific data in order to understand what sort of technology should go. If there is a high density area or a peri-urban area, then shouldn't it be mandatory because of certain assessments based on data and GIS systems? Because India has the highest density cities, like Kota has the highest density in the world, for instance. So shouldn't we have a management system and data system where we can take a decision, or ULB can take a decision that we'll have a decentralized system over here or a biodigester over here? How I would like to pose that question to actually whoever would like to answer it, maybe IIHS or maybe ISC, Indian Sanitation Coalition.
See, Mrinal, good question. But then, important is that, if the ULBs need to be influenced, and I think Santosh Raghavan may or may not agree with me, but then if ULBs is to be, impressed or influenced with any amount of data, then probably it has to trickle down from the top, from the state. So, a whole lot of information around a particular technology being, quite feasible, under a certain geography, certain terrain, considering all the local conditions, into account. Probably if a concerted effort is made, and as I think Paramita has already highlighted, the information is abundantly available and it is also easily accessible. And this pandemic has even made certain paid resources also absolutely free. So lots and lots of information can actually be gathered. And then if an initiative is actually initiated right from the state level, and then if we try and reach out to the, with the ULBs, probably it is going to be, and this I am saying based on my experience in Jharkhand and a couple of other states, whereby, where we actually lent our support through the Global Sanitation Fund intervention between 2013 and 2018. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanjeev. There is another question from which is very technical in nature, which I would like to pose to Mr. Thakkar from Mr. Aman Raj in the audience. How do we calculate water storage tank size for water coming from rainwater, especially in a school building? I think he might have a certain problem at his hand of area of 15,000 square meters. It's a very specific question. Would you want to answer it right now?
I think we need to meet up offline and take this up, because at the end of the day, you have to figure out how many inches of rainfall is happening over what period of time, what are the other inputs from the fecal sludge stream, anything which is commercial in a school thing. There are many months when the schools are closed. So all those factors will go into the calculation, and it can be done, and I'll be happy to interact.
Thank you so much. I think we've had a great interaction and with a bunch of extremely informed and very experienced professionals on board from variety of...
There is one more question that's coming. The gentleman was also raising his hand.
Sorry, did I miss?
I think Mr. Vijay Rajat Tandon, that's right.
Okay. I haven't received the question. So, Samir, would you like to just say the question aloud?
Just give me a second. The question is, we're saying this is a question by, I'm sorry, then his name's not appearing, but says, if people on the panel, what is the status of automation in sanitation and water purification sectors, especially in the decentralized modules?
Mr. Thakkar, would you like to take that? What is the status?
I don't think I have enough information on that. I'd leave it to maybe Sanjeev ji or Santosh. Maybe I don't have enough information. Sorry.
The question is, what is the status of automation in
sanitation and water purification sectors, especially in decentralized modules?
Would you have any information on this?
Maybe I can try and add. I mean, that's a very important, useful question, because as we start measuring something, how these are all performing. So it serves two purposes. One is how good the systems are functioning, and second is how to control or regulate certain. So one is there is a substantial push from the regulators to measure and monitor on a regular basis, right? So both in terms of flow and characteristics, including CPCB mandating all decentralized systems of certain scale to report regularly. I mean, automation is also specified, so there is a substantial push for that. So that's one. So second thing is that with the IT IoT, I mean, with the measurement quality and specification is still a question mark. So, but still there is a substantial move towards that. So I think we will see in the next 2 to 3 years, for example, fecal sludge treatment plants in Tamil Nadu, where we are trying to work. So we have already set up these systems, both for quality and characteristics. STPs, they are supposed to now measure, monitor through automated systems. And slightly larger systems also have some sort of a process automation. So that's also there. More importantly, so that's an area which is opened up for the private sector. So there are subscription models, especially for measurement and monitoring, and also the other one, which is like for running the systems. So there are private entrepreneurs who have started providing services on this. One through a subscription of say X amount per month. So we will provide measurement and also the diagnostics. So for example, we are working with 2-3 such players. One is incubated in IIT Madras, and they're also now commercial now. And also Bangalore, for example, has already implemented some of these large apartments and commercial complexes that have started using them. So there is a demand for that.
And is it part of the smart city mission? Automation is and data is?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So Girija, would you like to add to that from that perspective? Is that some?
Well, I don't have much to add here, but then IoT is something which is very, very useful in water and sanitation sector. It's coming in a big way, and a lot of private entrepreneurs are actually joining hands, starting from not just water and sanitation access, but also FSM. There are certain, in fact, India Sanitation Coalition would be knowing they have been awarded also the desludging, the small units like robotics they have used for desludging. So IoT is like the in thing, it's the future in water and sanitation. And if it comes in a big way, then the water sanitation sector is going to get revolutionized. I can't go into the details of that, but then these are some of my random thoughts.
Gen Robotics, if I can come absolutely quickly, in just about half a minute. Gen Robotics were the organization, who had come with their, the robotic system, which was able to clean potholes with minimal human and waste contact. I mean, absolutely no contact. So it's a machine with a human interface. And since the time I think IC have recognized them in 2019, they have already spread into around 10 states, and total number of ULBs where they have been engaged in one way or the other. I'm just forgetting the number. But then Gen Robotics in 2019 was one, and Gen Robotics in 2020 is quite another company. So they have already come a long way since,
If I may add just a few more seconds, I am aware of some of my juniors from IIT ISM Dhanbad who are into waste management, solid waste management. This is called Tuvaso. They are into towards fully digitized waste collection, and I was really impressed. I have also requested them to come and make the presentation to India Sanitation Coalition, because these are they're operating in Jharkhand, Jamshedpur and Dhanbad and some smaller towns. So they have something like a glove which basically has a hook to assess the waste, and also to check if it is completely segregated or not. If the source is not segregated, it gives an alarm. So it is very digitized, and these are 2 IIT graduates who have done that, and they're proud to be saying that they're my juniors, and maybe someday I'll make them come and make a presentation.
IC would be extremely grateful if we could have the coordinates, because we would invite them to send their nomination for the awards in 2021.
Sure.
I will.
Thank you. Surely, thanks.
Just to add to the other panelists, one last thing I can add, what the government is doing. So for automation, there is a challenge that the government has floated, which is for 200, in which 243 urban local bodies have qualified. It's called the Safai Mitra Suraksha Challenge, and wherein it is trying to eliminate manual scavenging. So it's called from manhole to machine hole. So basically the intention is that in future no human being should enter a septic tank or a sewage pipe and for cleaning. So there is a lot of focus that has been given on innovation and for small equipments that can actually get into the manhole and clean this. So the government and there's a lot of prize. I think the 5 crore is the first prize, and then 3 crore and 2 crore and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of incentivization from the government also, and this challenge is being administered by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the panel quickly, and I would like to invite because we're very short on time and we've exceeded the time limit. So I'm sorry, but I'd like to now invite Mr. Raj Gilda to give vote of thanks from Chevening Alumni India's side. Mr. Raj Gilda, just to quickly introduce, he's co-founder and director of Lend a Hand, and he's a banker turned social entrepreneur. It's an NGO which focuses on providing vocational education in secondary schools in India. Raj's journey in the world of skilling began as a son of small Kirana store owner as an intern to his father since he was 9-year-old. And Raj has been selling life insurance policies throughout his life. And he's based in Pune. Raj has come back to India and he has been instrumental in launching an innovative internship program for higher secondary school students, placing them with small and micro enterprises across 4 states, covering 10,000 plus students. He has worked across Asia, Europe, North America in the fields of education, banking, insurance, and information technology. Raj, over to you. Raj, you will have to unmute yourself. It's a green button.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much, Mrinal, for this wonderful introduction. I must say that thanks to this webinar, now I know more about sanitation technologies in 50 minutes than 50 years of my adult life. So I must, first of all, I'd like to thank Chevening Alumni India for giving us the platform to organize this webinar, and thank our fearless leader Priya Hingorani for opening remarks. Similarly, our panel members, decentralized sanitation, its need and advantages by Mr. Thakkar, introduction to biodization by Dr. Girija Bharat and Paramita Datta Dey, financing of this treatment by Mr. Sanjeev Jain, challenges in implementing this solution by Mr. Santosh Raghavan KV. We are also thankful to Mr. Ashish Mehrotra for setting the stage for the webinar. Ms. Soumya Chandra, the most powerful lady with admin rights, and for managing the webinar technology, and adding one more webinar tool that I can use now called GoToWebinar, and Mrinal Mathur for being the woman behind this event and being a great moderator. Next time I'm looking for someone to moderate an event, I'll certainly sort of know where to go in that case, right? Finally, I would like to recognize the exceptional work done by the organizations represented today in the sanitation sectors and implementing this new biodigestion technologies, beginning with Nirgandh, Mugama Consultants, IIHS, ISC FICCI, and NIUA. I think with such a huge focus on healthcare and sanitation in the budget we just got announced, we need you all the more. So please keep up the good work. And finally, 29 of you who stayed back to the end. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Soumya, I will introduce Soumya immediately because she's asking me to leave her out. She's supposed to give final vote of thanks. She has worked as a capability professional for the last 25 years. Her focus has been learning and development, capacity building for business results and organizational development interventions. And she's worked with the Oberoi Group of hotels for 8 years and various learning and business consulting organizations for over 16 years. Her exposure across industries has helped broaden the horizon of understanding and nuances of various business and capability requirements to make them into success stories. In her career of capability development, she has worked on culture building initiatives, engagement, and quality initiatives. Her need to be a catalyst and develop or drive change has helped businesses achieve measurable results and impacts. Over to you, Soumya.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mrinal. And first and foremost, Mrinal, thank you for moderating this event for us. And everyone else, thank you so much for coming in and putting all of this together. And it's really great to see that we've got a group of like-minded people who are working towards a common goal. So thank you so much on behalf of Nirgandh.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks a lot to the panelists for their time.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye, and have a good evening.
Bye. Thanks to the audience for staying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks.